Okay, welcome all. Thank you for joining TÜVSÜD's complimentary webinar titled SMETA Audit Insights, Ethical Sourcing and Responsible Recruitment in Global Supply Chains. Our speakers today are Alberto Sartori, Global Product Manager at TÜVSÜD Business Assurance, ESG and Social Areas, and Patricia Gamez, Enterprise Account Executive at Sedex. Before we begin our presentation today, we have a few housekeeping rules. If you or someone you know is having connection issues, please connect through LAN instead of Wi-Fi if available for better connectivity. Also, please view this webinar through the recommended browsers of Chrome, Edge, or Firefox if available. All participants are muted today to avoid any background noise during the webinar. There may be a time lag between slides. If you are having a problem, please mention it in the chat window. For the questions and answers portion of today's webinar, please submit your questions online via the Q&A tab on your screen. And there is a short survey to gather your feedback regarding today's session. We appreciate your feedback. Please stay on to answer these questions. And today's session is being recorded, and the recording will be available soon after the event if you missed any portion of today's session. Now let me introduce TÜVSÜD as well as our session today. TÜVSÜD is world-renowned for providing international testing, assessment, training, and certification services for over 160 years with offices in over 1,000 locations in 50 countries and represented by approximately 30,000 employees. As a global leader in management system certification, validation, and verification audits, TÜVSÜD's extensive industry experience and expertise elevate the management systems of our clients through our unique approach towards audits. TÜVSÜD assists companies of all sizes with tailored audit approach, specific to your company's size and industry. We can support you with various ISO-based management system standards, sustainability, cybersecurity, as well as customized audit solutions, and of course, assisting your company with sustainability in the supply chain, SMETA audits certification. If you are looking for a trusted, globally recognized provider that is responsive to assist with your company's transformation and certification needs, TÜVSÜD is your partner. And now a little bit more about our session today. During today's session, Sedex and TÜVSÜD will explore how Sedex members' ethical trade audits, SMETA audits, support responsible sourcing, and help identify risks in complex global supply chains. With a growing reliance on labor providers and recruitment agencies, especially across borders, businesses face increasing challenges in ensuring ethical and transparent recruitment practices. This session will delve into the specific risks uncovered during SMETA audits related to labor agency practices such as worker exploitation, lack of transparency in recruitment fees, and poor working conditions. During today's session, our speakers will also discuss how businesses can collaborate with labor providers to drive improvements, implement due diligence frameworks, and strengthen protection for vulnerable workers. Whether you're a buyer, supplier, or labor provider, this webinar will provide valuable insights and actionable strategies to enhance your approach to responsible recruitment and sourcing on an international scale. And now I'm pleased to welcome Alberto and Patricia. Thank you so much for presenting today, and now I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Susan, for your introduction. Hello, everyone. Let's start with an introduction on how or what are the challenges of global supply chain today, where transparency is really critical. What we see globally is like supply chain are really extensive today with suppliers all around the globe, which means that sometimes companies have difficulties in accessing to real-time information about their suppliers. So sometimes visibility is really limited in terms of what the suppliers are really doing in terms of risk in sustainability. There are also some problems related to political, economic issues that can affect to those global supply chains that we have to consider. Also, the cost is key here, that the pressure on cost and to find the best supplier related to the cost of their goods is very critical. And also the legislation and regulation globally, which has been increasing lately all around the globe. So those are the challenges, some of the challenges that companies are facing today. Just to give you some example, that's something we are seeing globally. So as you can see here on the screen, we have news from different parts of the world, from Myanmar, the United States, over Qatar, about issues related to forced labor, child labor, salaries, working hours related, environment. So it's something that every type of industry is facing today, and how we here together with Sedex and TubeSud and SMETA Audit can support companies in this journey. We all know that transparency will bring to business benefits in 3 different categories, as you can see here on the screen. From the finance side, we know that having more transparency in the supply chain will help companies to reduce cost and to increase competitiveness at the same time. It will for sure avoid having fines related to the regulation, and also to attract more investment, having a global chain which is more transparent and more control. On the reputation side, we know that that's key not only for investors, but also for markets, for consumers, that they will value that a company has the control in their supply chain and the risk of their suppliers. It will also increase and improve the relationship with suppliers. That's something that the companies together with the suppliers can work in order to improve the knowledge of the risk and to avoid this kind of issues. On the operation side, we know that having more transparency will help companies to improve and strengthen the resilience in the supply chain, and for sure will improve the working condition on the company side, but also on the supplier side. And also will promote innovation for sure and attract new talent to companies that are well known for their transparency and their sustainability. Just to give you some more details about Sedex and what we are and what we do. We are a British company with headquarters in London, but we have presence, as you can see here, globally from Asia, Europe, and also in the Americas. Today, we have more than 90,000 members globally and more than 100,000 sites, which is a really big community. We have been working on the transparency in the supply chain for more than 20 years. And just to give you some data about last year, together with our audit teams like TubeSud, we have accomplished and run more than 65,000 audits globally only last year. We work with all types of industries. You can see here more than 35 industries. Our audits and questionnaires are totally independent from the industry. We also work with small companies, medium-sized, and also large corporations. I would like to give you some more details about our platform and how, together with the SMETA audit, can help companies in mitigating risk and preventing these kind of problems in those global supply chains. Firstly, what you see here on the screen, we have a pre-assessment tool. This pre-assessment tool will support companies on having a first approach to the risk of their suppliers, taking into account their country, sector, and products of their suppliers. With this information, we can let you know without sending any questionnaire to your suppliers or running any SMETA audit, a first score on the risk of your suppliers. For this, we use 25 indicators, such as the International Labour Organization, those more than 20 years of SMETA audits, and we also use publicly data like a newspaper or articles. We take all of this information to provide you an inherent risk about your suppliers. Secondly, what we do is to invite the suppliers to the Sedex platform. For the ones that are already in the platform, we just send a connection link to them. Once they have accepted, they will have to answer to our two SAQs, a self-assessment questionnaire. We have one which is more focused on the social aspects, covering human rights, health and safety, and we have another one focusing on the environment, and also adding information on business integrity. With this information, we know what the suppliers are really doing, if they have already any certifications, if they have implemented any procedures or policies to avoid risk. We take into account the answers to the questionnaire together with inherent risk, and we are able to assess your suppliers between low, medium, and high risk. Once we have this classification, the next step will be to run and ask your supplier to run a SMETA audit. This is run by an independent third-party firm, such as TubeSuite, and they will have auditors globally that will go directly to your supplier site, and they will run the complete SMETA audit. It can be an audit of 2 or 4 pillars. 2 pillars are related to the social aspects, such as human rights, health, and safety. And the 4 pillars will add information on environment and business integrity. And last part, which is also really key in the process, is the reporting piece, together with the dashboards that the companies will find in the platform, so that they can analyze and report better on all the data collected in the platform. Also very relevant to say is that we are, from end of June, a GRI license partner. That means that we work together with the GRI in order to help companies to better report on their sustainability reports internally in the company. So in this journey, for sure, we leave the flexibility for the companies to select which are going to be the modules that they will use on their suppliers. What we recommend in Sedex is that for the most strategic and high-risk suppliers, you can carry out a SMETA audit on site. But for those who are on a low risk area, or they are not that important, not part of your main suppliers, you can say at the SAQ, the questionnaire, and the inherent risk score. Just to remind, here at Sedex, we support companies on accomplish the 4 pillars of the responsible procurement sourcing from social, environmental, and governance factors. So again, we cover those 4 pillars with the questionnaire and also with the SMETA audit. Now I would like to show you how those modules will be appearing within our platform. Firstly, what you see here on the screen is related to the inherent risk. So this country, sector, and activity risk about your suppliers. We are able to measure the risk of your suppliers from 0 to 10, being 0, low risk being 10, high risk. And we use those 25 indicators to give you this first risk on your suppliers. What we see here on the screen is the comparison between 3 different countries. We have selected Bangladesh, Brazil, and China, and we see the different risks that they have in an overview, and also the breaking down in the different categories, from forced labor, child labor, wages, and working hours. Next, what you see here is the questionnaire, the self-assessment questionnaire, which is a multiple choice questionnaire. The suppliers will be able to answer it in their mother tongue, and we also offer a 24/7 support help desk department so that they will help suppliers if they have questions around the questionnaire. Once we have collected this information coming directly from their supplier, we are able to classify all your suppliers, even including tier 2 onward, between low, medium, and high risk. Here, what you see in the screen is the result for one company where we have different suppliers. And within one supplier here, we see good suppliers from China. We see that they have listed 3 different sites, which will allow to collect data from those 3 different sites, which will result also in different scores. That's why we in Sedex collect the data always at the site level, because we consider that that's where the risk is really measured, or really well measured, not only on the headquarter level, but also on this on-site level. Here what you see is some screens about how SMETA audits are seen within the platform. This is one of the advantages that here at Sedex offer when we compare it to reading to one SMETA audit on a PDF version. Here for sure you can download both the SMETA audit and also the corrective action plan from this site profile of one of our suppliers. But more interesting, it's on the right-hand side where you can filter amongst all the non-conformities by criticality, by due dates, by status, and that will support you and help you to spot the issues and the problems within your suppliers easily as having to read 60, 70 pages of a SMETA report. Companies will also have access to the 5 latest SMETA audits of their suppliers, so they can compare and see how suppliers have been increasing and improving the situation in the past years. concerning reports, that's also really key and valuable. What we have in the platform, this dashboard, is only related to SMETA audits, and we can filter here by data range, by subsidiary, by country, and we can spot on a company level which are the most appearing non-compliances without our full complete supply chain. This will enable companies to very quickly spot where the issues are within their supply chain. And if you want to perform any activity, training, or any project to improve the situation within your supplier, it will be easier to spot where the problems really are. Very important here as well for procurement teams is our new supplier directory. This supplier directory will enable, and we support companies in looking for new suppliers within one country or several countries, and also filter by activity. They will have the list of our suppliers with their risk score, with the last audited date, and they can have access to the contact details of the suppliers directly from the platform. If companies are looking for new suppliers which are already audited, that's really a very good modules for this. And the last part, and really important as well, is the e-learning. This platform is available for buyers and also for suppliers, and it contains online training courses of all of our modules, from the SAQ, the questionnaire, the SMETA audit, and also the reporting piece. So this will help companies to train themselves before carrying out a SMETA audit, how to better be prepared and how to prepare the workplace for this kind of audits. So now we have one question for our audience. Are you considering implementing a SMETA audit in the coming 6 months, 12 months, more than a year, more than 12 months? Maybe not considering at this time, or maybe not sure. So take the time to vote, and we will see the results in a bit. Okay, thank you for your votes. We see that most of you are, half of the audience, let's say, is considering implementing a SMETA audit in the coming 6 months, and the other half is either not considering at this time or not sure. So I hope that after this webinar, it will be a bit more clear on this side. So thank you. I hand over to Alberto.
Thank you, Patricia. It's a pleasure for me to take over from your session. I am a product manager in TÜV Süd and responsible for coordination of our SMETA audits. We are proud to be an approved provider of SMETA audits by Sedex, and we have delivering these for several years globally. I would like to share with you some reflections and case studies from the field, with special attention to some recent trends we have been observing through our audit activities. The complexity in the supply chains that Patricia has mentioned is reflected, in our view, also in the various labor arrangements implemented by businesses in several countries. You see here a word cloud of situations, challenges, and issues faced by companies in ensuring proper labor conditions and human rights within their sphere of influence. In particular, what is striking us is the somehow evolution of challenges faced in ensuring basic minimum rights. We would expect that some situations would be somehow resolved, especially the most severe, the most serious violation of basic human rights. However, statistics and our direct experience show that this is not yet the case. Millions of workers in global supply chains still suffer from very severe violations of fundamental rights, of forced labor, child labor, human trafficking, modern day slavery, as this has been defined. And this is often presenting itself in combination with a surge in recent years of international migrant workers. As the International Labour Organization and other international stakeholders and organizations have pointed out, there is a direct correlation between the migration of workers for the purpose of finding new opportunities and the exploitation they may face in the receiving countries. And this poses challenges to several businesses in many countries. On top of traditional, let's say, or historical issues which have been somehow regulated at national and international level in an attempt to overcome these problems. If we look at the ETI base code that underpins the SMETA audits, this is strongly rooted in historical conventions from the international labor organizations. We see that some of the reference conventions have been in place for several years, some of them even for more than a century, more than 100 years. And SMETA audits have been addressing these issues from the start. As Patricia mentioned, these SMETA audits have taken place for several years. There is a great history of performance of business in the Sedex archives and records. At the same time, the SMETA methodology for auditing around these conventions has evolved continually over the years. So we are now at the 7th version of the SMETA audit methodology. And this evolution has accompanied also the new challenges faced in the social performance of business. We like then to ask you and contribute to the discussion with the new poll. When it comes to ethical practices and responsible recruitment in your supply chain, where do you see the biggest risks coming? Which are your highest concerns? Is it the child labor, forced labor, historical labor abuses and violations, which many people felt were resolved at least in global supply chains? Or do you see more problems in other type of issues like living wages not paid, or health and safety, discrimination, harsh or inhumane treatment of workers? Or you don't see any issues of this kind, that you're not sure where these issues could lie in your supply chain? And we will comment a bit on the results of your votes, and then I will present also some of the most recent findings from our SMETA audits and how these reflect the evolving nature of employment arrangements and supply chain arrangements at the global level. Let's give it maybe another minute for you to cast your vote, select the option you think best represents your risk situation in your supply chain or in your organization to the best of your knowledge. Let's see then. Okay, we see health and safety is the major area of concern for the voters, but with some distribution also to child labor and forced labor. And we recognize how these forms of labor exploitation is possibly the biggest concern for brands and companies. To make sure that they are not associated to any kind of issues of this type. Less for other aspects. However, situations can also vary a lot depending on industry, on country, the inherent risk that we mentioned earlier. What we experience in the field, however, is that some of these issues continue to occur as in the past, but there are also emerging issues which are quite new or occurring with a higher frequency. We have taken here two examples from recent SMETA audits undertaken in Europe on medium-sized manufacturing sites, which would be regarded in many cases to be low risk or under sufficient control. But actually, what emerged in both these cases, coincidentally, was an abuse of employment arrangements and outsourcing arrangements. While the situations were somehow different, they also had several similarities, whereby the employers, the respective employers, tried to bypass the typical employment obligations and social security obligations that are in place in Europe by avoiding the use of the traditional forms of employment, the direct employment, the permanent employment. In one case, there was a recourse to labor suppliers, in the other to service suppliers. But what our audits could establish is that these solutions were only apparent. In fact, the hierarchical nature of the relationship between the employer and the workers, the direct control and supervision of the workers, the provision of the means for their work, the regulation of their working hours, in fact, demonstrated that there was no independent arrangement of work, as would be expected with atypical forms of employment, outsourcing, or service provision. And this is an issue that Sedex has addressed for some years already. You can now see at the bottom of the slide the quote from the relevant requirement in the SMETA methodology, making clear that avoiding obligations under employment laws or social security laws or even basic ethical principles should not occur by using fake apprenticeship solutions or temporary worker arrangements where there is no purpose of exploiting the flexibility of these systems. But the only goal is to reduce labor cost or reduce the level of protection to workers. This is a feature that has been addressed in SMETA audits for a number of years, but unfortunately is becoming quite more frequent in our audits as part of our observations. Another area of attention is related to a more recent evolution of SMETA. In fact, an area which has been revised significantly in the latest version of SMETA 7, the so-called responsible recruitment. which connects to this increased complexity in supply chains and, again, frequent recourse to intermediation arrangements for getting access to workers, either through service providers, but more frequently also with labor agencies or equivalent type of services. What is now expected as part of general consensus in workforce management and as now clearly regulated under SMETA, which is fully aligned to the best practices in this regard, workers should be validated in their legal right to work regardless of whether they are recruited directly or indirectly through business partners or third parties. In fact, when using the services of a recruitment partner, a job agency, or similar, the company should implement an appropriate due diligence, making sure that there is no delegation of responsibility to the recruitment partner or outsourcing of employment responsibility. If you do not recruit workers directly, but you use a partner, that doesn't mean you are relieved from all your responsibilities to ensure responsible working practices and avoid labor violations. This includes making sure the partner that may be responsible for recruitment practices, for scouting workers also in other countries, and helping these workers migrate and travel to a destination country, responsible also for their salaries and their payments, are not responsible in labor violations. And the cost of these solutions is consistent with making sure these workers are afforded the minimum necessary conditions. This includes performing special due diligence on possible recruitment fees and related costs of recruitment. This is a growing topic of concern. This has been in place for some time, but we are seeing in the field that this is becoming of growing importance to companies and those using SMETA. The concept of due diligence is becoming more popular also with business. We see a surge in legislation globally in the area of sustainability, of ESG, requiring business to implement proper due diligence in their supply chain. So what we just mentioned is just an example, a specific implementation case of a more general expectation of responsibility in selecting business partners, in making subcontracting or outsourcing arrangements, in general, ensuring no negative impact occurs not only in your directly controlled operations, but along your entire supply chain. In fact, as I said, what our experience is showing is that the companies are not yet familiar with this. They are not ready. They have not familiarized with this concept, and they have not embedded these principles in their operations yet. Except for some pioneer companies that have more mature systems and policies, but our findings in SMETA audits frequently highlight a lack of approach when it comes to indirect workers, recruitment through business partners, and due diligence of such partners. This is just an example from a recent audit, again performed at a manufacturing site in Europe, a middle-sized company, so not a small company, where you would expect a lower risk in the employment of workers and perhaps of a higher maturity in approaching these topics. But the findings from this specific audit could be replicated in many similar other situations as well. And what was striking in the review of the information and in the execution of this audit was the level of awareness of management on these topics. And this is the quote below from our auditor that confirmed the low awareness of people in connection to the topics of recruitment fees and associated issues like debt bondage, human trafficking, and in the end, violations of basic human rights. Again, I have selected a couple of case studies from recent SMETA audits, an automotive factory, in this case, a large factory, so we talk about more than 1,000 workers. Another factory, again in Europe, an electronic factory. In both cases, the issue of recruitment fees was identified through our audit activities, which means the workers had paid so-called recruitment fees or placement fees in their country of origin, in this case, Philippines, in order to get access to job opportunities in Europe. And unfortunately, our auditors tell us that this problem is becoming more widespread. This, at least, is the feedback in advanced economies where we operate. Different challenges and issues may occur in SMETA audits in other countries, in developing economies, or in sending countries for these migrant workers. But what our field experience suggests is that the business is making a more frequent use to this intermediation solution, these providers of job-related solutions by recruiting workers in other countries. However, the supply chain, let's say, of these employment solutions, if we may call them, does not come without risk. This is not here to claim that all companies active in this area are operating out of legality. However, this is a call for increased attention by management, by employers, by HR functions in the due diligence of the partners of their choice. In some of the cases that we have identified and listed here, the audit activities suggested a low level of awareness of management, and in many cases, no direct involvement of management in these kind of issues. Actually, a lack of control, lack of oversight over the partners that then generated these kind of issues. So how can companies anticipate, prevent these type of issues? And especially if you are preparing for a SMETA audit that will definitely touch upon these areas, how can management best prepare? First of all, build awareness and familiarize with the topic. There is a rich literature now available that you can consult, including guidance documents from Sedex about what is responsible recruitment, what is appropriate and good practice due diligence on recruitment partners, and also what should be the approach towards recruitment fees and related costs. Conduct this due diligence by engaging your partners, collecting information from them, collect the information requested for SMETA audits, for example, or for your self-assessment on the Sedex platform. Engage your partners to collect the data, but also to state clearly your expectations, your compliance expectations, making sure the legal requirements are fully clear and covered, but also the good practices and best practice expectations in responsible recruitment, even beyond the law where necessary. I would like to leave some room also for questions from the audience on this SMETA audit and these focus areas. So before moving to our Q&A session, let me just remind you that if you wish to increase also the level of awareness and understanding in your company on these topics and in general on corporate responsibility, on sustainability impacts, best practice management solutions and systems, check out our Academy portfolio of training courses. We have several courses available covering different technical topics, including sustainability, supply chain management, and risk management. You can scan the QR code here or click on the link to serve our catalog of training courses and choose the best one for your needs. And with that, I thank you already for your patience and for your time. And we can certainly take some questions from the audience before breaking up.
Alberto, Patricia, great job. Thank you so much for sharing your SMETA audit insights. So yes, if you have questions, please submit it on the Q&A tab on your screen. In the meantime, Patricia, Alberto, we have had questions come in from the audience. So we could start with those questions. Let's start with you, Alberto. What are the most common nonconformities identified in recent SMETA audits? And how can companies proactively address them?
That's very interesting, Susan, because we recently had some statistic information from Sedex that we could review and analyze. As Patricia showed earlier, there's plenty of data in the Sedex platform that is very helpful for business, but also for audit companies to understand where challenges lie. And Sedex mentioned how they see in the audit results so-called more detected areas and less detected areas. One of the most detected areas is health and safety. This is typically an area where it is somehow easier to identify the violations for a variety of reasons, because legislation has historically been in place in this field. Violations can often be identified visually during our visits to workplaces, while in other areas, the so-called less detected code areas, establishing sufficient evidence of these issues can be quite difficult. This is one of the challenges in our field. And when we come to modern-day slavery, issues connected with responsible recruitment, especially across borders, involving multiple players, this can become really complex. And that's why we have also appreciated that Sedex is encouraging audit firms to focus on these high-risk areas, also with new means and new solutions. For example, by giving greater credit to interview testimony, to worker testimony, which we apply in our SMETA audits. So we certainly collect evidence from our visits to workplaces. We review documentations and records, which is absolutely helpful for verifying issues on work hours, for example, or wage levels. But the testimony from workers on the nature, the true nature of their employment relationship, or the journey they have done to reach that destination, that employment solution, will be an area of increased focus for our auditors going forward.
Okay, great. Thanks, Alberto. And don't forget, please submit your questions online via the Q&A tab on your screen. Okay, we still have a few minutes. Patricia, we have a question for you. Which industries most commonly undergo SMETA audits, and why are they particularly aligned within this framework?
Thank you, Susan. Honestly, as I introduced before during my presentation, SMETA audit can be used and carried out in every single industry. They are not industry aligned, but it's true that the industry that are mostly more taking SMETA audit right now are the food and beverage manufacturing industry, the retail, apparel, and fashion, so as the pure manufacturing industry. Those are the industries that historically have been working on the transparency of their supply chain for longer, And those are the industries in which SMETA audit have been more spread globally. That's a tendency that we see in Europe, but we also see in Asia and in most of the countries. But once again, they are not just limited to those industries.
Okay, great. Thank you, Patricia. Let's see, again, the Q&A tab, please submit your questions online. And we still have some time. So Alberto, we have a question for you. Can you share success stories where addressing audit findings led to measurable improvements in worker well-being?
Okay, well, we perform several audits worldwide, and I would say the vast majority of audits, of SMETA audits, end up with some requests for corrective and improvement actions, which we then monitor for effective solutions. So I would say we could quote several examples of positive impact driven at our clients in various workplaces. Some of these issues may be of lower impact, but in some cases, the change can be quite impactful for the workers affected. Something I personally appreciate so much is when we drive change beyond the minimum regulatory, because in some cases, we establish deviations from legal requirements. We ask the companies to restore the level of compliance, which is ensuring the minimum to operate in compliance to the law. But Sedex, in some cases, goes beyond and is aligned to good practices in the field of responsible recruitment. So some of the criteria we look at and some of the corrective actions we push on our SMETA clients go beyond the minimum legal. And to see advancements in this direction is really positive and uplifting for us as an audit company to measure this kind of improvement. I recall a recent case in a factory where we discussed the implementation of living wage and premium payments for overtime work. The company was acting in compliance with applicable regulations, so there was no violation on the wages paid to the workers. However, they were not meeting this benchmark that Sedex has created for responsible companies. And in engagement with management, we somehow explained and educated management as to the higher threshold expected of them. And that was new to them. They did not expect this. They felt confident they were meeting the law, which was the case, and it was confirmed. But they decided still to move on and raise their performance. And that meant raising the wage levels of workers, which is fantastic to see how you can drive this kind of improvement also with your SMETA audits.
Excellent. Thanks, Alberto. Great examples there. Okay, we have a question from one of our audience members. Patricia, this question could be for you. Can SMETA audits be integrated with other sustainability or compliance initiatives to reduce audit fatigue for suppliers?
Thanks for the question, for sure. And this is a question that we received a lot. The fact that why don't we take the chance that an auditor will go to the site of the supplier to also audit other modules rather than SMETA, like quality or different internal categories. So that's something that it can be done, that we know companies that are doing this are auditing SMETA together with additional modules at the same time, so that instead of having two separate audits, that they have all included with SMETA and the extra modules in the same audit. with maybe the same auditor, maybe two auditors, but in the same time frame, more or less. So we at Sedex, we allow for sure this practice, and it's something that we see a lot in the last days. So it's true that some companies, they want to add some specific modules to what SMETA already covers, and it's a good way to do it, and approved by Sedex for sure.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Patricia. Don't forget to submit your questions. We have a few more minutes. Patricia, with the industries, you kind of covered this a little bit, but how do SMETA audit findings typically differ across industries, apparel versus electronics versus agriculture?
So I would say that in the human rights and more social, in the apparel and fashion, we spot some differences more related to risk with child and forced labor. That's something that we also see in agriculture. And it's in the environmental side, it will depend. It will depend on the company, it will depend on the sector. We see a lot of non-conformities related to water consumption, for instance, in agriculture, that we also see in apparel. So there are some synergies that we see in all the sectors, and something which are more related to some of them, like maybe working hours. In agriculture, we see a lot of non-conformities on that side, sometimes also in apparel. So there are differences, but maybe not that many. Health and safety, for instance, non-compliances about emergency exits, emergency drills are appearing in every industry as well. So yeah, there are not many differences in terms of the sector. It's more maybe in terms of the region. So we see similarities in suppliers in Southeast Asia and some similarities in South Europe. But true that there are some sectors which are more critical in this side, which is agriculture, apparel, fashion, where most of the non-conformities are even related to forced labor, working hours. So yeah, it depends. But I will say in general, the region itself will have a great wave in that, apart from the industry. That's something that it's also quite well known, unfortunately.
Okay, thanks, Patricia. All right, we have time for one or two more questions. Here's another question that came in. What metrics or KPIs should companies use to measure progress in ethical sourcing and responsible recruitment? Alberto, Patricia, you want to take this?
I think I can answer that by saying that Sedex has now a wealth of indicators embedded into its platform and in the SMETA audit methodology. Several indicators of this kind are now collected either through the self-assessment questionnaire or through the audit. This ranges from the workforce composition, wage levels, working hours, but also environmental indicators are an important part of SMETA for pillar audits. Positive change is not always so evident in indicators. It's hard to say which metric really shows improvement. If you consider environmental performance, certainly you can consider whether the use of natural resources has reduced or impacts on the environment, the consumption has reduced, impacts have reduced, and so on. But in terms of labor performance, that's where it's difficult or almost impossible to measure quantitatively, let's say, progress or performance. A lot of our work is making sure no human rights violations or labor violations occur. So the KPI there is zero tolerance. You don't accept any kind of issues to this regard. In terms of wage levels or working hours, again, it's hard to say which is the KPI that shows the responsible company. Certainly, you want to use this SMETA audit and the analytics from the Sedex platform to see performance over time arising from the audits in terms of number of non-conformities, where those non-conformities occurred, were they resolved, how long did it take to resolve, and the Sedex platform can provide all of this information. I would say process-related KPIs of this kind can be a great tool.
Yeah, totally agree with what Alberto has said. I introduced that we have several tools in the platform, but for sure SMETA audit, it's going to be the most accurate amongst the different tools, because it's when an auditor will go directly to the site and will prove what they are, what suppliers are claiming they are really doing it. So for us, that's so the non-conformities found it, and the fact that they have been closed in a certain amount of time is going to be the KPI that Sedex can provide to companies on the most reality level. Because questionnaires, we know there are other platforms, other software platforms offering questionnaire, but only a questionnaire, it's not gonna be enough for measuring the risk and also the improvement of suppliers. So we also rely a lot in SMETA audit and on the report side that we offer in the platform, that companies can check how their suppliers have been working and improving in the non-conformities identified during a SMETA audit. So companies, we can rely in the platform reports to understand better how has been the journey for their suppliers and how they have been improving throughout the time.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Alberto, Patricia. Great session today. Since we're at the hour, we'll wrap up. But thank you so much for everyone for staying with us today and participating. As mentioned, we did record the session. We will send out the recording after today's event. And don't forget to participate in the survey. We really appreciate your feedback and comments regarding today's session. And also be sure to visit our tuvsud.com website to get more information on SMETA audit insights, ethical sourcing, and responsible recruitment in global supply chains. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much for joining.